Presentation. Let's continue now staying at the on Kazakhstan with our second speaker. So we first discussed with Aigerim these issues of regions in difficulties. Now with Sergey we will be looking more at the elite level of the higher educational system in Kazakhstan. So Sergey Marinin has been working with the OSCE election observation missions in Kazakhstan, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Secretariat in Copenhagen. He was a research fellow at Soros Foundation Kazakhstan Public Policy, and also at the Center for European Security Studies in Netherlands, which is our kind of sister fellowship in Europe. And during his research here, he has been working on how Kazakhstan Western educated youth can be transforming the society through civil and volunteer initiatives. So Sergey, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, dear friends and colleagues. This spring, Kazakhstan has witnessed youth activism awakening. It started out online with the hashtag Save Astana after interim President Tokayev announced capital city's renaming, and continued further on with two young activists jailed for spreading out a banner that read, "You cannot run from the truth," calling for fair elections, and further jailings and detentions of active youth, some for citing the Constitution, the others for protesting against social injustice or ridiculing government's repressive response to peaceful civic displays. This has reopened discussions on the role of youth in the civic engagement in Kazakhstan. Earlier this year, on January 23rd, then President Nazarbayev kicked off a big initiative called the Year of Youth that was intended at developing considerable social benefits for young people of Kazakhstan. The whole complex of the activities of this initiative included, among other things, social engagement with the state through volunteerism and social responsibility initiatives. The state rationale of Kazakhstan here is pretty understandable. Kazakhstan wants positively engaged youth, but does not quite do it successfully. Large-scale surveys of Kazakhstani youth suggest that they are less involved in conventional politics. They distance themselves from the state. And that has actually been also a global trend, especially in the Western post-industrial societies where youth is also quite politically disengaged. But Kazakhstani youth, especially, they do not trust political institutions, they vote less, they do not participate in political parties, and overall they are politically disenchanted. And they want less interaction with the formal sectors of civic engagement. Instead, they resort to informal ways of social involvement, either through less politicized means, like donating to social causes or sporadic, spontaneous volunteerism, or by expressing their social responsibility online, in social media especially. So in such a context, I wondered what young youth civic engagement means in Kazakhstan. And to answer this question, my research looked into a specific case study of Western educated youth, one of the formative elements of ruling and political elites of Kazakhstan, and how they see themselves in the process of civic engagement. Essentially, how they contribute to social change through civic initiatives. For the purpose of the study, I define Western educated youth as young people aged 18 to 35 who receive their educational background or work experience either in Western style academic settings or Western countries in general. And in my study, I also included Bolshak government scholarship holders as well. The main method that I employed for the study was a survey. I surveyed 113 people, and I tried to measure, among other things, three key issues. Number one was the interplay between the quality of education and level of engagement. And here, not surprisingly, 84% of my respondents said that their education and their experience abroad significantly contributed to their comprehension of what it means to be civically engaged. I also was interested to find out what actually Western educated youth does in Kazakhstan, whether they participate in any civic initiatives, and if yes, what are these initiatives? According to my findings, 44% of the respondents said that they are currently involved in some kind of civic initiatives, and those mainly included charity, volunteerism, alumni fund support, education, such as giving English lessons for free, as well as some human rights initiatives. I also attempted to measure the potential, future potential of Western educated youth of Kazakhstan to participate in civic life of Kazakhstan. And here, surprisingly, 85% responded positively that they would actually be willing to participate more in civic initiatives. Clearly, I was also interested in finding out the factors limiting civic participation of Western educated youth, and those mainly included lack of time, clearly lack of motivation, lack of confidence that their civic initiatives would be effective, as well as fear coupled with lack of freedom of speech. The results of my study revealed that although the level of engagement of Western educated youth of Kazakhstan is limited, it is still there. Young people, they readily contribute to educational, charitable, volunteer, as well as some human rights initiatives. And it's a very important finding that I came across, that they do not perceive themselves as an opposing force, but rather seek opportunities within the established political order to help transform the society on many levels. This vision of cooperative rather than contesting narrative is challenging the established view in the West that active youth civic engagement equals being in political opposition. My research also showcased the willingness of this cohort for change. The government currently preoccupied with the power transit and its stability is not particularly interested in letting loose of youth civic activism, let alone developing strong civic institutions. Therefore, that's why the space for social expression for young people still remains minimal, and the state will probably react quite harsh to the uncontrolled displays of civic engagement. Given this challenging political context, I would propose to the Ministry of Education, the Republic of Kazakhstan, to develop a campus-based university peer learning pilot program that would employ recent graduates of Kazakhstan that received their education in the West as instructors to promote civic engagement through training in communication skills, critical thinking, and leadership ideas, basically the soft skills that are lacking, unfortunately, in our higher education system. This curriculum development and oversight, there needs to be created a committee comprised of course, the ministry representative and the faculty members, as well as Bolshak administrators. That is very important to include them as one of the stakeholders in this process as well, and more senior Western university alumni that would select these instructors based on their proven track leadership and civic initiative. So that is my overarching recommendation. I have more in my paper that will be published in a few weeks, so if you're interested, please follow it. And thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sergey. Let's give a round of applause to our two fellows from Kazakhstan. And let's now continue with our two fellows from Uzbekistan, who both are looking at the developments since Mirziyoyev has been in power of the private educational system, both at the university and at the school level. And by private educational institution, I mean both the arrival of foreign educational institutions and also the rise of local private education. So our first speaker will be on that Uzbekistan field will be Dilnoza, Ubaydullaeva, who has been studying at the State University of World Languages in Tashkent, then at the University of Tsukuba in Japan, and she's now based both as a full-time staff and as a PhD student at the Australian National University. Dilnoza is an education expert and researcher who studies trends in internationalization of higher education in Uzbekistan, and during her time here at GW, she was especially looking at the rise of foreign university branch campuses and the issue they are creating for the Uzbek national educational system. Dilnoza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marlene. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege and honor for me to present my research findings this morning. As mentioned by Marlene, today I'll be presenting my research findings on proliferation of foreign university branches in Uzbekistan. According to the World Bank study, Uzbekistan's higher education system is one of the least efficient in the world. It can only absorb 10% of applicants, and there is a very high demand for higher education among the youth in the country. Uzbekistan's 85 local higher education institutions do not have the capacity to intake the yearly influx of more than 700,000 applicants. Currently, Uzbekistan does not have any university in the international university rankings, such as Times Higher Education Ranking. And yet, after President Mirziyoyev came to leadership in 2016, authorities have shown some interest to reform the higher education sector. Among the noticeable changes is the proliferation of foreign university branches. Recently, they were exempted from all taxes, and to use these favorable conditions, universities from US, India, Russia, China, and South Korea were opening their branches in the country. To compare with the last 2 decades, the number of foreign university branches in fact tripled this year, from only 7 in 2016 to 19 as of May this year. And these are the universities that are already operating in the country. There's a whole list of foreign university branches that are under the negotiation stage. While these changes are important and great in terms of widening the access to higher education, the recent developments shows that the reform of the sector, specifically the establishment of foreign university branches, seems to be least planned. So my research asked how current government over-reliance on opening of foreign university branches as a form of reforming the sector may affect the broader higher education system in the country. On the basis of my research findings, I argue that higher education reform in the country cannot be sustainable only on relying on opening of foreign university branches. In order to support my argument, I reviewed the legislative basis of education in the country, which are law on education and national program for personal training. I also conducted interviews with local teaching staff of local higher education institutions and teaching staff of foreign university branches. I was also lucky to talk to the management of 2 foreign university branches in the country. On the basis of the review of the documents, my data confirms that there is no reference to internationalization of higher education in the country in general, and there's no reference to internationalize the sector by way of opening foreign university branches in particular. The conducted interviews also gave me an opportunity to see huge gaps between these local higher education institutions and foreign universities branches teaching and operational mechanisms. So the current trend of opening of foreign university branches might be perceived by the government as an immediate step to improve the image of the sector, or it may be perceived as something that solves the current issues of local higher education sector. On the basis of my interview data, I discovered 4 points that I'd like to mention. My paper would have more, but I'll be focusing on 4 points this morning. First is autonomy, both financial and academic. Foreign university branches in the country have complete autonomy over their academic curriculum and financial management, so the government does not ask them to teach any course that they would ask local higher education institutions. And they are free in terms of their financial management and budget models. Whereas in local higher education institutions, the universities need to follow all the rules and regulations set up by the Ministry of Higher Education, plus all the other players in the sector. That includes Ministry of Finance, that includes the Cabinet of Ministers, etc. Number 2 is international standards of teaching and learning. In foreign university branches, Teaching and learning standards are international. Student assessment tests are done in line with those standards. Students have an opportunity to use electives. They are exposed to academic support programs, whereas in local higher education institutions, we still observe the old-style teaching and learning methods, where students are not specifically instructed what's academic writing, what's plagiarism, and thus they lack those skills. The third point is international faculty and staff retention strategies. There is an international faculty in every foreign university branches. Even the locally hired staff have overseas qualifications. And my interviews indicated that staff in foreign university branches have better financial remuneration, professional development opportunities, as well as autonomy when it comes to designing their individual lesson plans. Whereas in local higher education institutions, the system is still old style. Most of the staff complain they're actually busy preparing a lot of submissions to high-level offices instead of focusing on their lessons quality. And there's no sign that these best practices are going to be implemented in local higher education institutions yet. And the last point is student experience and employability. Students in foreign university branches have a better opportunity to be exposed to internship opportunities, they get career guidance, and much more influence of the speakers that come and give public lectures in the universities. Whereas in local universities, students have to try themselves to reach out those opportunities. And I also noticed that from my interviews, the term the student experience is also least known or paid attention to in local higher education institutions, because when students come, they have to come and study and that's it. Whereas in foreign university branches, students have much better learning resources such as libraries, up-to-date literature, as well as internet connection that allows them to use all the resources worldwide. So the current higher education policy, which gives a lot of liberalization to foreign university branches, but still has the centralized system of management to local higher education institutions, does not look sustainable. If all these best practices that are used in foreign university branches, the ones that I've mentioned, are not going to be implemented or adopted in local higher education institutions, or they do not have some sort of domino effect on the practices used in local higher education institutions, then these reforms will not be sustainable. In fact, this kind of trend will result in emergence of two parallel worlds of higher education. One liberal, autonomous, independent, and one still centralized and very regulated, old-style governed higher education system. In order to avoid the emergence of these two parallel yet very distinct systems, the government needs to come up with a comprehensive reform strategy of the sector. So on the basis of my research findings, my first recommendation would be to set up a working group under the Cabinet of Ministers, consisting of leading international as well as local experts, who will study the cases how governments in transition use internationalization to reform the higher education sector, and what needs to be done to reform the local higher education institutions, rather than focusing only on the opening of foreign university branches. And the first reform should touch the hierarchy of higher education ministry and all the players at stake in that field. Currently, we have Cabinet of Ministers, who is the top level in terms of making decisions, headed by the Deputy Prime Minister Aziz Abdulhakimov. We also have Ministry of Higher Education, we have State Testing Center, and a number of other ministries that are involved in making decisions about each and every university. My next recommendation is development of internationalization policy at the sector level. That way, normally internationalization happens at the university level in the West, we know, but given the way higher education is managed in the country, my recommendation is to first set up internationalization policy at the sector level. That will make then the universities, the opening of foreign university branches would not be as sporadic as they are now. That will make it publicly available selection criteria, why and how these university branches are being established. That will enable each individual university to come up with their own local internationalization strategies, which will enable them to set up partnerships with universities worldwide, to improve dual degree programs or staff and student exchange programs. And my last recommendation would be making the universities self-governing bodies. And that's the core basis for development of each university. when they are autonomous, when they are making decisions on their own about their finances, student recruitment, admission caps, then universities will be able to develop their strategies for long-term and short-term, and will do their best to enter the both local and international university ranking systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dilnoza. Our last speaker for this roundtable on education is Firdavs Navruzov. Firdavs is has been studying at the Bukhara State University and then at the Minnesota State University, and he was also an Edmund Minsky intern here in 2015 at the US Department of Education. Firdavs is managing the language and tutoring school called LTC Leader in Bukhara, and he was the first to open a private school also in Bukhara called the Knowledge Academy, and as you can guess, is an education leader and expert researching the private education sector in Uzbekistan and the issue of giving academic freedom to private institutions. So Firdavs, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marlene. And hi everyone, thank you for coming to our panel. As Marlene mentioned, I'm a principal at a private school, and this is important to mention because my research here at GW is about granting academic independence to private educational institutions in Uzbekistan. And being a principal, I have a first-hand experience in seeing how this is progressing or actually not progressing. So that's what I'm trying to say here. So since in September 2017, a presidential decree on the development of private educational institutions came out. And this decree gave a start to a very huge rise in the number of private schools. In just 1 year in Uzbekistan, the number of schools tripled and even quadrupled, if to be correct. So from 15 to 20 schools, by the end of 2018, we had 84 private schools all around the country. And while these private schools enjoy a lot of benefits and governmental support in terms of tax exemption and many other benefits, actually, there is one serious problem that I think should be changed. So the problem is that private schools in Uzbekistan have to follow the same curriculum, the same educational program as public schools, as we have one uniform curriculum throughout the country. And this is problematic in many ways, and one of the first reason why I think it is a problem is because a uniform curriculum would definitely stifle innovation in education. It would also leave practically no room for creativity in terms of school administration and even teachers themselves. So as an example, although there have been a lot of changes in the past 2 decades, there hasn't been much change in the state curriculum, while there has been a technological boom around the world, and we still teach and learn practically the same subjects like 20 years ago. So we still focus on the rote learning rather than critical thinking, and following the state curriculum. Private schools cannot go around this program to teach more innovative programs and pedagogies. So the second problem with uniform curriculum is that in our case it's also uniform textbooks. So we have the same textbooks all around the country for everyone. And this the lack of variety in the production of textbooks creates prerequisites for monopolizing the system of developing. So we have one developer that provides books for the whole country, and we cannot ensure really the content and the quality of these materials. And the last problem with the uniform curriculum is that schools, most of the schools around the country, and private schools including, they cannot take into consideration students' knowledge level and their context. And by context I mean that every region, like in any part of the world, in Uzbekistan, every region has different job markets, has different educational institutions, and even requirements to, like the knowledge requirements to get into these institutions and job markets. For example, you cannot really compare a child at a financially and pedagogically disadvantaged rural school with a child in a capital city, Tashkent, which has much more to offer in terms of pedagogy and amenities. And as well as the these two children do not have the same access to the job market, and they don't have the same access to the universities as well. So while I was doing research, one of the main question that was leading my research, guiding my research, was what are the benefits of granting greater academic independence to private educational institutions. And although there are a number of them, I would like to mention 3 of them today. So number one benefit would be that competing curricula in the education system would lead to a healthy competition. What I mean is private educational institutions, when they have the freedom to develop their own programs, they can consider their context, they can consider the changes in Uzbekistan and outside Uzbekistan, and thus they would definitely improve the quality of education and in these schools. And this improvement of quality would eventually force public schools to compete with them as well. But of course, in a healthy way, what I mean is that public schools would have to improve their quality of education as well. So they would have to retrain the teachers, they would have to redesign their programs, and they would probably even have to add some amenities that are missing in most parts of the regions. And this practice is not only relevant to Uzbekistan. While doing research, I found out that a lot of countries, especially developing countries, including our neighbors like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, India, and some of the African countries, they have helped private schools to develop, and by doing this they only benefited the system of education. They did not just get rid of the financial burden, but also they improved the education system throughout the country. So another benefit, the second benefit that I would like to mention, is that giving academic independence would lessen the burden for kids. As a principal of private school, I can see a lot of private schools trying harder and harder to get better education to give better education for their children, but by this they cannot do this because of the uniform curriculum, so they have to add extra classes, they have to add extra activities, which is a lot of pressure for kids. For example, if a public school keeps children until afternoon, like 1 or 2 o'clock, a private school would keep children until 6 o'clock because of the additional programs. And I know of some of the schools that have actually dual curriculum to develop this, so that they have one program in the morning, the state curriculum, and their own curriculum in the afternoon. And this creates a lot of pressure, especially for primary school children, because they cannot handle this, and there is also a lot of expectation, let's say, from the school itself, from the parents, because they're paying, and this is overall can lead to a lot of stress, as I mentioned. So an academic independence would let schools to minimize these hours. And the last benefit that I would like to talk about is actually directly connected to the public sector itself. A diversity of programs would lead to a diversity of ideas. And there is a widely held belief that governments always have a better knowledge of technology of education. But if the evidence shows that private schools that are more autonomous in their practices and that are more responsive to students and their parents, they actually can deliver education in more efficient ways. So the public sector and private sector could work together and create cumulative programs that would benefit both the public sector and the private sector. They could learn from each other some of the administrative and teaching practices. So these are the 3 main advantages, and I would like to mention also that it's not all negative, of course. We have a new roadmap that came out a couple of weeks ago by the President Mirziyoyev, and this roadmap perfectly sums up a lot of problems that we have in the public education system, and also lays out plans for improvement of this, for the solution of these problems. So, they do mention about the uniformity of textbooks, but there is no mention of the uniformity of the programs. So what my recommendation to the Ministry of Public Education in Uzbekistan would be, first of all, we need to come up with a policy that would grant not full but greater academic independence to private schools, that would help them to develop their own programs but also adhere to the minimum educational standards in the country itself. The second recommendation would be that there is a Republican Center of Education under the Minister of Public Education, yes. So this center could allocate a team of experts to go to work with these private schools in developing more effective curricula and at the same time ensuring the efficiency. And the last one is that before coming up with the policy, we probably also need to pilot some of these programs with a representative body of these schools, not the whole student body, because we don't want the whole school undergoing experimental programs, so we need to pilot to see how this actually works out and whether it is we should take the next steps. And so I think that's about it. So if you have any questions, we will be glad to answer. Thank you.